Okay, here we go. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. And hello on Zoom, and what's your name? You're probably muted, but anyway, welcome. Welcome to the Zoomers as well. Tonight, I'm going to talk about some of the teachings of Mel Weitsman that I have found really helpful over my years of practice. And for those of you who don't know or have never heard of Mel Weitsman, he began practicing Zen in the San Francisco Bay Area around 1964. He was an early student of Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center. And he was ordained as a priest shortly after starting practice. He established a Zendo in Berkeley, California in 1967 that later became the Berkeley Zen Center. And he practiced and taught there for 55 years and died in 2021 at the age of 91. He was the teacher for our founding teacher, Norman Fisher. And he was also the teacher for Andrea Thatch, who sat with us for a few years when she lived in Bellingham. And his one and only book, Seeing One Thing Through, The Zen Life and Teachings of Mel Weitsman, came out in January this year, and I read it during practice period. It's part autobiography and part just a number of his talks that he's given over the years. It was put together by his students. And so I never met Mel personally, but he wrote a lot of articles in various Buddhist magazines over the years, and so I've read quite a few of his talks and his comments on different things. And one of the things that he wrote often about was Zen forms. You know, the way we organize our meditation hall, wearing dark clothing, the bowing, the chanting, the ritualized way we eat during meditation, and the way we move around the meditation hall. And I appreciate our forms. I haven't minded learning them and following them. But I think that's not always the case, especially I think when people are new to practice, they wonder like, what are we doing? Why do we do all this stuff? And some people don't like them. And so I found his explanations about the forms very informative. And so I think I'm just going to start with a quote from him. And here's what he says about forms. There are many forms of spiritual practice, and everybody has their own way. It's not up to me to decide whether someone is doing it right or wrong. If people don't like the formal practice we do at Berkeley Zen Center, there are plenty of other places to practice, but if someone wants to do this practice, they should follow our way, and we will help them. I'm trying to keep our practice pure. We're not doing it just any old way, because then we wouldn't actually be doing it. As soon as we start adapting the practice to what everybody wants, we find out this one wants to do it this way and that one wants to do it that way, and pretty soon we're just accommodating everybody and nothing is left of the practice. You can't bend the practice to fit your idea. You have to soften your mind to fit the practice. You have to walk through the small door. It's not up to you to determine how the practice goes. It's up to you to conform to the practice. And when you can do that, the practice becomes your own. So early in my time here at Red Cedar, I used to go sit with other groups once in a while, attend other meditation retreats, and I was still looking around to see what's the best fit for me. And I remember attending one retreat, and it was a day-long retreat. There were no instructions about how the meditation hall was set up, and no instructions about clothing or anything like that. So, some people had bright clothing on, and Some people were leaning against the wall, and some people were lying down, and there were backpacks and coats and water bottles around. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, but it made me realize how much I appreciate the kind of peaceful, meditative setting we have at Red Cedar and other forms of Soto Zen. When I walk into a room like this that's arranged, and I feel a sort of settling and a peacefulness that I don't feel in a room that's, just any which way. And it actually, for me, it really does help have a deeper meditation experience. Let's see here. And Norman Fisher a few years ago wrote a book called What is Zen? And he wrote that with another longtime student of Mel Weitsman's, Susan Moon. And this book is a series of questions that Susan asks Norman, like, why do we do the forms, or what's enlightenment? And, lots of questions about Zen, and Norman would answer them. And there's a section in there about bowing, because when Norman first started practicing with Mel, he wondered about too. He asked Mel, why do we bow, and what does it mean? And here's Mel's response. He said, you bow to the Buddha, and the Buddha bows back to you. You are not bowing to an external power. You are bowing to your true self, which is identical to the Buddha. Your bowing is conditioning you to respect what is deepest and truest within you and in everything and in everyone else. Now, I don't mind the bowing myself. I like the physicality of it, especially after I've been sitting. I like to stand up and bow. It's a little bit like stretching. And I've always appreciated the emphasis on physical practice in Zen, paying attention to your breath, paying attention to how your body feels, paying attention to your posture, noticing when feelings and thoughts come up and where they show up in the body. And bowing is part of that physical practice. In the reading that I've done about forms, a couple things are always mentioned. And that, first of all, following the forms helps us move through the Zendo smoothly. We bow together, the bell rings, we stand up together, or we sit down together, we walk together. So it just makes everything flow. And then secondly, once you know the forms, you don't have to think about what to do or when to do it or how to do it. It's all laid out. And that actually, for me, and I think other people have said the same thing, it makes for a deeper meditation experience. You just go along with what the forms say. And you can, that's certainly been the case for me, but each of you can kind of see for yourself whether having forms and not having to think about what to do actually helps you have a deeper meditation experience. And the other thing I have, I think, just decided for myself about forms is they come from the practice of our Zen ancestors, from the men and women who, over hundreds of years gave their lives to Zen practice. They lived in monasteries, they practiced their whole lives. And these people figured out some ways to do things. And I just actually trust the wisdom in that. I figure they probably know more than I do about how to do these things. So I appreciate that wisdom has been passed on over hundreds of years, and I just have faith in it. But Mel, a couple years ago, I came across another piece of writing Mel did about forms, and it was something new that I had never read before. He said that Zen intentionally puts you in limitation so that you get to see how you respond to limitation. You do a meditation retreat, you really don't get to decide anything. The schedule is set. You meditate when you're supposed to meditate. You walk when you're supposed to walk. You go to the bathroom at certain times, you eat at certain times, and then you get to see how your mind and body respond to those limitations. And the reason that's so important is in our life off the cushion, it's filled with limitations. I mean, there's how many things every day happen that we don't get to have any decision about, but we do get to decide how to respond to them. So it's really a good idea to have an idea of how your mind and body responds to limitation and to have some skills. You know, whether it's a little thing like the slow line at the post office, or a big thing like recovering from an accident or an injury where you have to really limit your activity and do things a certain way. One of the most valuable lessons I ever got in Zen practice happened within the first 6 months when I started. And some of you have heard this story before because I've used it in previous talks. I had been sitting 2 or 3 months, you know, like this, 1 or 2 periods of meditation once a week. And I signed up for a 5-day residential retreat. So we sit maybe 10 periods of meditation a day. And I wasn't used to that, and my body wasn't used to that. And about the 3rd day, my knees were just killing me. I mean, it felt like they were on fire. And back then, I thought that once you start sitting, until the bell rings for walking meditation, you can't move. And I'd look around and nobody would move. So I thought, well, I can't move either. And my knees were just killing me. And, you know, my whole body was tight, and my jaw was clenched, and my shoulders, and my mind was like, oh my God, I hate this, and when's the bell gonna ring, and why did I come here, and how am I gonna get through the rest of the day, and maybe I'll just go home, and just, I mean, it was just, my mind was, you know, on fire too. And then the bell rang, and immediately, before I had a chance to move at all, 3/4 of my pain went away. My knees still hurt, but I realized I had tripled my pain with my thoughts. And I didn't think such a thing was possible. You know, how could your knees hurt more because of what your thoughts are? But believe me, it can happen. It was a huge lesson. And, you know, since then, of course, I know if you're having a real painful something during meditation, you can do a bow and you can change your posture. But there's a lot of pain that we can't get rid of, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain. So to be able to, like if my knees hurt, can I relax the rest of my body? Can I notice that, you know, my arms feel fine, my shoulder feels fine, my feet feel fine. It's not, you know, it's not my whole body, it's just my knees. Can I study the pain in my knees a little bit? Is it increasing or decreasing? Are there spaces where there isn't any pain? And most importantly, what am I doing up here? You know, can I relax my jaw? Can I relax my thoughts? Can I just accept that I'm having my knees hurt without making it worse? And that's a great skill to have, to be in a painful situation and not make it worse. My wife and I had a chance to practice that recently. We went to Florida on vacation, and then we were going to fly back Miami to Seattle to Bellingham. So we got to the airport on a Saturday, and you know, flight is delayed, flight canceled. So they put us up in a crappy hotel and told us to come back the next day, so we did. Same thing. Flight delayed, flight canceled. And then they said, come back on Tuesday, you know, 2 more days. So we thought, no, we're not going to do that. So we, you know, called around and we found another airline, and we arranged a flight from Miami to Charleston, Charleston to Seattle. And thought, well, at least we can get to Seattle today. So we went over to the next terminal, and that flight was also delayed. And by the time we got to Charleston, our flight to Seattle had already left. So then we had to spend a night in at least it was a nicer hotel in Charleston. And the next day, our flight didn't leave until 7 o'clock at night. We caught that one, and we got home late that night. But we spent 3 full days in the airport. And I spent very little time wishing this wasn't happening, or, just, writing angry letters to Alaska Airlines. And I didn't do much of that at all. I read, we met some people. I was patient with all of the customer service people that we talked with, and I reminded myself, it's not their fault. They're trying to help me, so don't chew on them. And I attribute that to Zen practice. I've had lots of practice working with limitation and watching what I do with it, and it comes in very handy sometimes. So I thank Zen practice for not making that situation worse for me or anybody else. Another thing that Mel Weitsman has written really well about is, in meditation, the balance between the active and the passive. There's a role for each thing. And so I'll read you a little bit about what he says about that. The passive side is letting things come and go, opening completely to everything without trying to block anything and without trying to inhibit the difficulties and problems, not holding anything. The other side is purposeful effort of body and mind, maintaining posture and focus. When we put forth our total effort to maintain the form and at the same time open ourselves up completely in a passive and accepting way, we have the perfect balance of being and doing. It's the harmony between these two which accounts for our being comfortable or uncomfortable. Even though we may have pain or discomfort, it doesn't succumb to suffering. And to me, that's a very helpful description of where to put your effort, to allow whatever thoughts or emotions or memories or anything come up, to notice them, to acknowledge them, to let them float away. And not to try to hold on to the pleasant ones, but to let them also arise and float away. And at the same time, pay attention to your posture. If you find you're leaning, straighten up. If you notice that instead of watching your mind, you're making a grocery list, you gently remind yourself, come back to your breath, come back to your body. But that balance of active and passive, it's a nice thing to keep in mind. Another thing that Mel's teaching emphasizes is to bring your practice into day-to-day life. There's not, in my opinion, much point in meditating if you just, get off the cushion and forget all about it. And so to try to bring the attention that you pay in meditation into your day-to-day life. And Mel would often ask himself, how do I do what is in front of me? How do I practice moment to moment? And he says the first thing is to be grounded, always to be grounded, which really means to give your full attention to whatever you're doing. He says, as an example, when you pick up the cup of tea, pick up the cup with both hands. Drink the tea with no separation between you and the cup and the tea. The cup is not an object. The tea is not an object. There are no objects. So this is just paying close attention to whatever you do. And this is something each one of us can do as many times a day as you want to. Can you eat one meal and just look at the food and notice what it looks like and what it smells like, and notice the action of raising the food to your mouth and putting it in your mouth and chewing it and swallowing it and tasting it? Can you do that once a day? Or can you drive a car for 5 minutes and just pay attention to the driving? I don't know about you, but I'll go 20 or 30 miles and I think, I know I've been paying attention well enough to not have an accident, but it's almost like I haven't been paying attention to my driving. Or if someone is talking to you, can you give them your full attention without thinking about what you're going to say when it's your turn. That's a skill. That's a beautiful skill to have, to be a good listener. So there's many things we can do every day, little things to just train ourselves to bring our practice into day-to-day life. Let's see here. Get my pages all mixed up. And then in preparation for this talk, I listened to a Dharma talk by Gil Fronsdale. And Gil teaches in the Vipassana tradition now, but for many years he was a student of Mel Weitsman's, and he lived at San Francisco Zen Center. And he gave a talk on the occasion of Mel stepping down as abbot of the Berkeley Zen Center. And he just gave a talk on his relationship with Mel and some of the things that he really appreciated. And one of the things he said is that Mel never labeled things as problems. They were just situations that he had to deal with. And he would always ask himself, what is requested of me in this situation? And Gil said he would always stay grounded. And as an example, Mel was on the board of directors of the San Francisco Zen Center for many years. And in 1983, there was a big scandal. The abbot who succeeded Suzuki Roshi had to resign because of sexual misconduct and some other things. And it caused a big turmoil. And many people left Zen Center. And, there was, I think, some concern, is the Zen Center going to survive? How are they going to get through this? And Gil went to talk to Mel just to find out, what's his reading on this and how does he see things. And he said he never labeled any of it as a problem. It was just something that he had to deal with. He wasn't particularly concerned. I'm just going to deal with it the best I can. And that attitude, it makes me think about, like one calm person in a difficult situation can make such a difference. When you think about the training that firefighters and paramedics have, they come into these very challenging, difficult situations, or doctors, and they've been trained what to do. You just get in there and do your thing without adding a bunch of, oh my God, And that's an extremely valuable thing to bring to any situation, to be grounded, to be calm. And then another value that just comes through in all of Mel's teachings is continuous practice. Meditation, you do meditation every day, you practice every day, you practice every week, you practice year after year after year after year. Continuous practice. That's why he titled this book, Seeing One Thing Through. And it's how he lived his life. He was abbot at Berkeley Zen Center until about October 2020, 3 months before he died. So he just stayed with it as long as he could. And then the last thing I'll say is a little comment that Norman Fisher made. Norman wrote the introduction to this book, and he said of Mel, he was my friend and teacher for 50 years, always reliable, always kind, always patient. So that's a pretty nice epitaph. So these are some of the things that I really appreciate about Mel Weitsman. So maybe we'll do the chant, and then I'll turn off the recording and we can... May our intentions equally extend to every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Well, I don't know how to stop recording. So.
You should be able to push the same button. Get into here.
Disconnect audio.